I guess the battle cry for this season is here we go again. Here we go again. Okay, let me say this. I officially do not want to hear any defense of Amber Cox, Kelly Crossfoff, Stephanie White. None of them. Are we seriously doing load management in the WNBA? Is that what we're doing? I cannot even imagine.
The entire Indiana Fever storyline around Caitlin Clark collapses into a single repeating nightmare. Here we go again. Caitlin Clark becomes the center of a storm where expectation, trust, and frustration collide at full speed. The phrase load management attached to Caitlin Clark immediately triggers disbelief because Caitlin Clark is not just another rotation player. She is the entire economic engine of the franchise. Caitlin Clark's presence transforms arenas, ticket pricing, and broadcast attention. So when Caitlin Clark's name enters any injury discussion, the ripple effect is not athletic. It is financial, emotional, and cultural. Caitlin Clark had already lived through a similar cycle last season, where Caitlin Clark's availability became uncertain for weeks, stretching fan patience and trust. Now Caitlin Clark is back in the same conversation again, and Indiana Fever leadership finds itself under the same pressure. Communication breakdowns, late updates, and rising suspicion. Caitlin Clark's absence becomes more than a roster update. It becomes a pattern fans remember too clearly. Caitlin Clark's impact is so large that even rumors of load management feel like strategic manipulation rather than medical necessity. Caitlin Clark represents hope for Indiana Fever fans, and when Caitlin Clark is suddenly removed from the lineup, that hope collapses into frustration instantly. Caitlin Clark's situation is no longer about one game. It is about whether the organization can be trusted with its most valuable star. Caitlin Clark's status update becomes the center of chaos when the timing of the announcement itself raises more questions than answers. Caitlin Clark is reportedly fine one day, and then Caitlin Clark is suddenly ruled out the next, without any prior warning on the injury report. Caitlin Clark's situation escalates because fans already purchased tickets, booked travel, and planned attendance around Caitlin Clark's presence. Indiana Fever leadership now faces criticism not just for the decision involving Caitlin Clark, but for when that decision was made. Caitlin Clark becomes the focal point of accusations about transparency, because Caitlin Clark's name was still used in promotional expectations while her availability was quietly uncertain. That contradiction builds a perception that Caitlin Clark's absence is being strategically delayed until after ticket demand is secured. Caitlin Clark's value to the franchise creates a tension where every update about Caitlin Clark feels like both a medical report and a business decision.
Indiana Fever status update. Caitlin Clark's back is out today. Wow. Status report for tomorrow's game versus Portland. No injuries. Status update. Caitlin Clark back out. So let me get this straight. You put out the status report just to try to sell tickets like you did last year. That's exactly what you guys did.
Caitlin Clark's back injury explanation is framed as strategic management, but Caitlin Clark's supporters interpret it as repetition of last season's communication breakdown. Caitlin Clark's fans remember how long uncertainty lasted before, and now Caitlin Clark is again at the center of that déjà vu. Caitlin Clark's absence forces Indiana Fever into defensive messaging mode, where Caitlin Clark's health becomes secondary to public perception. Caitlin Clark's name drives engagement, but Caitlin Clark's late scratch drives backlash. Caitlin Clark's situation exposes a deeper structural issue. When Caitlin Clark plays, the franchise thrives. When Caitlin Clark is absent, trust erodes immediately. Caitlin Clark's ruling out becomes more than an injury story. It becomes a psychological fracture between fans and Indiana Fever leadership. Caitlin Clark's supporters begin comparing current decisions with last season's long day-to-day cycle that stretched far beyond expectations. Caitlin Clark's name dominates discussions about transparency because Caitlin Clark was not listed on the injury report until the final hours. Caitlin Clark's absence from the report creates suspicion that Caitlin Clark's availability was always uncertain but intentionally withheld. Caitlin Clark becomes the center of accusations that the organization is prioritizing ticket sales over honesty. Caitlin Clark's influence on attendance is so massive that even a late announcement changes perception of intent. Caitlin Clark's fanbase begins to fracture emotionally, Some defend Caitlin Clark's health management, while others interpret Caitlin Clark's situation as repeat mismanagement.
Caitlin Clark's been ruled out for a back injury, with a back injury for tonight's game. She was not on the injury report yesterday. Venom. Go subscribe to Venom Reacts. Fever fans, wake up. Yesterday, no injuries reported. Last second scratch, the main attraction, Caitlin Clark. They want your money. They know you're at the arena waiting for Caitlin, and wouldn't show up if they pulled this yesterday.
Caitlin Clark's repeated absence from injury reports strengthens the belief that Caitlin Clark's situation is being handled inconsistently. Caitlin Clark's trust factor becomes the most valuable currency in the franchise, and right now Caitlin Clark is at the center of a trust deficit. Caitlin Clark's impact is no longer limited to the court. Caitlin Clark is now tied to ticket resale prices, arena attendance perception, and even travel decisions. Caitlin Clark's name alone can shift demand in hours. Caitlin Clark's situation mirrors broader league conversations about load management, but Caitlin Clark is different because Caitlin Clark is not just a star. Caitlin Clark is the franchise identity. Caitlin Clark's repeated late scratches create a financial ripple effect that extends beyond one game. Caitlin Clark's absence directly impacts resale markets, with ticket prices collapsing when Caitlin Clark is ruled out. Caitlin Clark becomes the measuring stick for organizational credibility. When Caitlin Clark plays, Indiana Fever gains national attention. When Caitlin Clark sits, Indiana Fever faces backlash, empty seats, and rising frustration. Caitlin Clark's situation also fuels speculation about long-term consequences, including whether Caitlin Clark will eventually reassess her future if patterns continue. Caitlin Clark's influence is so strong that even rumors of dissatisfaction create league-wide attention. Caitlin Clark's presence has already elevated Indiana Fever into one of the most watched teams in the league. But Caitlin Clark's absence reveals how fragile that success structure really is.
Okay, this is BS. Yesterday, no injury. Today, the star player is out. You guys are deceptive to your fan base to sell tickets. It's not good at all. This is the exact same thing they did last year. This is the shady business practices they pulled last year. She's day-to-day. Oh, day-to-day. Again, day-to-day in sports means any day now she's going to be back, not 12 weeks later. Just like last year, it's...
Caitlin Clark's situation now becomes part of a repeating narrative. Sudden absence, delayed communication, and post-facto explanations. Caitlin Clark's fans recognize the pattern instantly, and Caitlin Clark's name becomes attached to phrases like "history repeats itself." Caitlin Clark's future implications grow heavier with each incident. Caitlin Clark is no longer just dealing with game-to-game management. Caitlin Clark is now tied to franchise reputation stability. Caitlin Clark's situation raises the ultimate question: can Indiana Fever maintain long-term trust while Caitlin Clark remains the central attraction? Caitlin Clark's latest late scratch becomes more than a roster update. It becomes a trust test for Indiana Fever leadership. Caitlin Clark's absence exposes how dependent the entire franchise is on one player, and Caitlin Clark's name now sits at the center of both success and controversy. Caitlin Clark's story here is not about one injury. It is about communication, timing, and credibility. Caitlin Clark represents the league's biggest draw, but Caitlin Clark also represents its biggest pressure point. And now the question that defines everything moving forward. If Caitlin Clark continues to be the face of the franchise, can Indiana Fever afford even one more situation where Caitlin Clark's availability is revealed at the last possible second?